Hello, I'm Cynthia Hessen with Jeannie Ritter, the former First Lady of Colorado, Linda Alvarado of Alvarado Construction, and Dyllan McGee, producer of Makers. It is wonderful to welcome all of you ladies and to be able to talk to you for a few minutes after this short screening that we have had. Dyllan, I know you've done one or other of these events so far, and you found that the audience was interested to know about how women today could learn from past trailblazers. Are there enough parallels, or is history not going to repeat?
I mean, one of the amazing things as I launched on this journey of creating this was how little I knew. I mean, I think I'm 42 years old. And I grew up with a lot of people sensing that there was this progress that was taking place, but not necessarily, feeling I was of the generation that you can have it all. And very much, pursued my life that way. And then, someone said to me, well, why haven't you ever done anything on the women's movement? And I said, well, what's the story?
What's the headline?
And I think it's so important once you connect with these stories. I think there is, Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo, says in this film, it's a very controversial moment where she says, I'm not a feminist, but I believe in women's rights. Right? We've heard that so many times. What does that mean? Right? I mean, she is a feminist. But there are these, the F word, we call it. I mean, it has these connotations. And my hope with this film and understanding that history was that you can see all the extraordinary things that took place and the changes that took place and all the feats that these women have done. And that, that there's still work to be done. I think there is, someone says it in the film, there's this feeling that, it's done, been there, done that, we are equal. And we have had such extraordinary strides. But there is, Gloria Steinem has this great quote, social change takes 100 years, and we're 50 years in. And now we got to think about the next 50 years.
Did you, with your mother or any woman in your early part of your life, did you sense that there had been a struggle, or did you kind of just think full sail, free sailing ahead? I
had a stay-at-home mom. Who played Free to Be, You and Me. Every morning I knew there's a land that I see. And it was kind of no. I guess it's the answer to her question. No.
Did she seem happy?
She seemed happy. She was very much aware of it, and I think she was projecting on me all of the feelings that everyone else was. She says, "You can do this. Why aren't you running for president of the of your grade?"
Wow.
I don't know. So I was aware of it through her, inspiring me to do things.
All right, so that's then where I was going with you, Linda. What did you know in your early years about what you could do or should do or people expected you to do? What was your mother or grandmother important in that?
I grew up with 5 brothers and no sisters, and certainly I had a mother and a grandmother. And while I thought it was basic training and torture, it actually enabled me to get very competitive in sports. And back to my mother and my grandmother, my mother encouraged me to play baseball. I built forts in the backyard. I thought every girl had an erector set. And I will recall that while my mother's mother died when she was under 5, she and her sisters came together generationally, not having the opportunities of the doors being open that I might have. I think the support system that they had, even though they were not alike, agreed on anything, I think women were beginning to understand choice was the big opportunity. Field day, and I don't know if you had field day when you were in 6th grade, remember? And it was all about you're going to graduate and go to middle school. And they were going to have all these athletic contests. And I came home and I was a little upset. And my mother said, "Mijita, my little dear one, what's wrong?" I said, "I tried to sign up for high jump and they said no." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, they told me only boys can do this." But she says, "You know how to do high jump." I've been high jumping in the backyard with my brothers. A lot of it was to escape from them, but over the back fence. And she said, "Let's go." And I said, "Let's go." She said, "Let's go." I said, "Where are we going? We don't have a car." She said, "We're going to school." I said, "School's over." She took me to the principal's office. And I'd never been to the principal's office. And the principal was about 6'8", and my mother was 4'11" on a good day. And I'm sitting there, he's here, she's there, and she looks up to him and says, "Senor Blanco," which, please don't take that as a racial term. His name really was Mr. White, Michael White. And she said, "Linda really would like to do the high jump." And she says, "You don't understand, Mrs. Martinez, that girls get to do volleyball, they get to do dodgeball, they have lots of fun, we have snacks, it's really cool." But she says, Mr. White, will you not think about it?" He says, No, this is our tradition." She says, "Well, just think about it." I'm going, "Oh my God." We went home. And she said to me, "Linda," she gave me a quesadilla and water, and we could afford milk. I just didn't like it. Now that I'm an adult, I can drink other beverages with my quesadillas. But she said, "You got to raise your hand if you want to do something. Don't break the rules, but raise your hand." I said, "Okay." 2 weeks later, she said, "Well, how's it going? You ready for a field day?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "What do you mean, yeah?" She says, "Well, aren't you going to participate?" I said, "No." She said, "Let's go." She took me back to the principal's office, and she said eventually, "Please, Mr. White," in a very polite way, "it's not just about Linda. What if other girls want to do this too?" Well, I was the only girl who signed up for high jump, but I won.
Oh my God.
But this story is not about me. This story is about my mother and other women who said, like my mother would say, anybody can be a member. You got to step up. Even if you do make A's in school, Lauren, you're an A student, you got to raise your hand like you're doing, get into the game. Otherwise, you're just a member. You need to assume leadership positions. And I will always remember that, and I still have the little ribbon.
Wow. This was in Albuquerque schools?
Yes.
That's where I was born. I didn't
really?
get old enough there to go to school. But
I went to Aztec Elementary.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm sure we have more in common than that. Let me ask you the same question, Jeannie Ritter, which is, who was an early influence in all of this? Did you run into any walls? Did you think, I can do anything? What did you think?
It's interesting. We talk about this as if it's in the past, And I have to say, I have sisters that are on an hourly wage.
Now?
So, yeah. So I was fortunate. I was the only one in my family to go to college. I had a high school counselor who said I really wasn't college material. So you're looking at something that's not college material. But I was encouraged, by my folks. And it was a big risk for them, a big financial commitment to after having raised two older girls, to say, let's see if this one can go to college. So, and I feel like, it's evident that was a big game changer for me. To have that opportunity,
That's I had no idea about your background, but I did not know that. So you were the third child. Were there any below you?
And I have a brother, a younger brother, yeah. We ruined him, too.
Yeah. You don't want more?
One's good.
I grew up in a family of three girls and a boy. I'm the eldest. The boy, however, I actually consider my father a feminist, before the term was coined, because he and my mother from the very beginning, certainly encouraged me to be whatever I wanted. I never was aware that there might be any problem with that. And so I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was I just saying? Aren't you glad this isn't live TV?
Did you have a moment? So did you ever hit any roadblocks?
Thank you, Dyllan. Help me out
Yes.
here. No, I didn't hit any roadblocks, but I also knew that it was important to my father in that larger way, where your mother was saying, this is important not just to Linda, but to other girls. Yeah. And that's what I remember first when I remembered something about my parents, both of them. They were in education, and so, they, I think, were on that leading edge of some things. And so it's just interesting how each of us has had our own experience with all of these things. Yeah. What else? I'm sorry, I put my piece of paper down here.
One of the things that was challenging, I would say, about the film, too, is to get all those different perspectives. I mean, we really tried hard to not show a bias, but to show both sides. I mean, if in the bit you saw about the feminine mystique in Betty Friedan, well, there was a group of women who were feeling like what they were doing, what are you saying about staying at home and being a mom? Mm-hmm. And that's a valid, experience that was going on, these two camps.
It's interesting. Not all women agreed with what you referred to as the F word, but in reality, you saw Pat Schroeder in the documentary here. In 1977, there was a National Women's Conference in Houston.
I covered that.
Did you really?
It was one of the first things I ever covered.
It's in the film. I went.
Oh, you did?
And my kids were small, and here's this little shirt.
Oh.
This is great.
I mean, it's so great.
That my two daughters, Heather and Jennifer, I brought them one back, and you see it's the National Women's Conference, November 18th to 21, 1977. And here were the shirts we wore, and I brought them back. To your point, well, we have a big conference going on in this side of Houston. There was another big conference of women in the other side of town who did not agree, and the issue there was trying to pass the equal rights movement.
Oh, right.
And it wasn't protesting, but it was marching. It was advocacy. It was talking about issues of equal pay, of opportunity to go to college, and in level playing field. But it's kind of interesting in that regard, because you had groups of women, Phyllis Schlafly being one who was not supportive on one side and one the other side. But you know what? It wasn't that we disagreed. It's that we were not just observers. We were now into the game, raising the issues, trying to find solutions. And quite frankly, out of that came, unfortunately, not the passing of the equal rights movement at that point in time, but the ability for women to be raised on the national scale, on the national television, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But the catalyst, as you know, for starting smaller groups within not just the big cities, but all over the country. So this was not mine. It was not that small, but Heather and Jennifer.
It's hilarious.
You remember.
You see those T-shirts in the film, women running, holding a torch.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And all the first ladies gathered.
Yeah, there were 4 first ladies there. And the beautiful part about this is
not
that...
the first ladies of Colorado.
No. Oh, no. not the very best. But, my son was just born in January of 1977, and I came home, and my husband, Robert, who is a huge champion, was there with the kids, and they all had little signs saying, "Women on the Move." And I can't thank Robert enough for his support, and the many men who not only enabled crazy people to, like their wife, to be known as a contractor or a baseball owner, and be such supportive and champions of that. And interestingly enough, many men, while they were not supportive, many men as fathers and grandfathers and brothers and cousins really enabled women who were no longer just working 9 to 5, but traveling, being gone for long periods of time. And while it wasn't uniform, it was at least an opportunity to try to balance that. And I think we talked a little about the life balance thing, and that's been the most difficult thing, I think, as women have moved from not just jobs, but to careers. Absolutely. So thank you, Robert, and all the gentlemen in this audience who've been
very
so
good.
supportive.
Jeannie, at some point you decided to go into, was it the Peace Corps or Vista?
Peace Peace Corps. Peace Corps.
Okay.
Peace Corps,
So when
Tunisia.
you may want to tell us more about your decision with that, but did you find that in that body there was a certain expectation maybe based on how women had done before you?
You know, it's interesting because that was 1963, not when I joined. I joined later after college in the late 70s, or early 80s. But he was signing. President Kennedy started the Peace Corps in '63 too, and that absolutely sent women. Right, the two of them. So my experience was, if you can imagine, in North Africa. So I had it kind of took everything back about 30 years.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a gal from California who was, really evolved in the early 80s in terms of gay rights and stuff, and she just couldn't manage. So she had to go back home. But I kind of made it work for me. It was a great opportunity.
That's interesting. You mean because there was an opportunity that opened there? Or because you saw what happened with her and you said, I'm going to...
Yeah, I just thought, I'm living here on the Mediterranean in this, Arab culture. It was a great opportunity for me. But I could see why she couldn't rectify it coming from such a progressive place,
Stepping back.
Have to step back just didn't work for her.
But the world was changing, and some people think that all the leadership was only in the big cities. But as the women's movement expanded, Dyllan, I know you cover this in your documentary, women were doing new things, and it wasn't because they had to, except for sometimes necessity of women taking jobs, but you had this great talent out there. Personally, I was never bored because I never knew how to cook, but it was not part of the prenuptial. But going into different fields, and the interesting thing is I want to show you a picture of my daughters. And I don't know if you can see this or not. I can hold it higher, I guess.
Just hold it in one place.
Hold it in one place. You have your pajamas on?
Very cute pajamas,
Okay,
by
great.
the way.
But this is a picture of my daughters and myself, and they're holding a book. And the book says, "Mothers can do anything."
Do you want me to hold that?
Oh, great.
I did not buy the book. My husband bought the book.
Oh.
And the interesting thing about this is when you look through the book, what surprises you is not that it's about women starting new careers in the courtroom, but also on the tennis court. Okay? As the director of the symphony, right? Or the conductor of the symphony, but also the conductor of the subway, doing different things. What surprised me the most when Robert brought this was not that he was supportive. It was written by a man in 1976. 72. Sorry, I'm not that old. Okay. So he had been painting and he was listening to radio. He was an artist, and he would hear about women talking about what they were trying to do and how they were trying to move forward. And he thought he ought to put it in a very, very fun way. There's a picture of you here, Rob, your little monkey. And I like the part about contractors. Mothers fix pipes and mothers fix teeth. And it was kind of what was happening. And so the idea was you didn't have to do it. The other thing about this book was, touched my heart, it's all about mothers, that you don't have to be, superwoman and not be a mother. We're trying to balance that. It's about mothers can do everything or anything that they choose to. So in glamorous ballet dresses, but also working in the mines, it was really an amazing thing. It was to inspire young girls, but we were making progress, kind of. My son Rob here, and he wanted me to mention this story. I know. They want me to tell this true story. I can't make it up. I went to Rob's kindergarten class, and it was what do you want to do when you grow up day. And they had a contractor, and I took my hard hat, my level, my blueprints, and my handheld, and talked about careers. They also had another parent who went, who was a nurse, and talked about careers in nursing and so forth. The teacher asked him afterwards, "Rob, when you grow up, don't you want to be a contractor like your mother?" And he said, "No." And she said, no, don't you want to build stadiums and high-rises and aquariums? And he said, no, that's women's work. While we were making progress, and there's a picture of you, Rob, you can see him standing in front of my pickup truck and how happy he is with his arms crossed that he did not want to do that because that was women's work. We were making progress in the context of changing the stereotype. And while myths and stereotypes die slowly, we were making progress. And he didn't become a contractor, but I am very proud of what he's doing. But the balancing of that, for him to think in that short period of time that he'd want to do it because girls did it, that was pretty amazing.
And you can hear that story on makers.com.
Oh, is it? So there you are.
And there he is.
Let me, we have a little bit of time left. Wynn, do we have any questions? All right. Does anyone have a question written on a card that you would like to pass up? We really only have time for one or two. And while we're waiting for that, let me just ask you each to comment briefly on this thing that we talked about at the very beginning, which is where women are continuing to make some strides in some areas. We've also seen questions come up again about women's health and so forth, some things that, as you heard in the documentary, people thought were settled. Why is that, Dyllan?
Why is that we've got some progress and some... I mean, for me, the big takeaway of the documentary is that we still have a lot of work to do around childcare. And, the working poor. It's something that, a woman in the film says, it's the failure of the women's movement. I don't know if it's... but it is something that is so important. It affects so many women, and if women are right now very much stuck in middle management. We have only 19 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. We're making progress in Congress, but we're not there yet. I mean, in education, we are doing phenomenally, but once we reach the workforce, we're just not making it to the top. And part of that is working on this child care issue. It affects people across the board.
That makes a lot of sense. Jeannie, do you have a thought on that?
It's interesting. I'd love to see more of the documentary, but culturally, there's no message out there about self-care. And so inside of this conversation, there has to be the topic of self-care has to come up. That you
can't help somebody else unless you've taken care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that, then the power to support one another instead of, because sometimes it becomes divisive even amongst the women. How we champion the stay-at-home or how we champion those that work outside the home. And so we have to really figure out how we align ourselves and take care of ourselves and support one another as we continue this work.
Very important.
I guess the interesting thing is that you saw Melissa Meyer up there, and the question is, can you have a baby and be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Try being pregnant on a construction site. The reality is balancing, and I think it's the other issue, what she mentions is balancing family and work life. And it's never been easy to do that. And my husband was good enough to go to the mother-daughter brownie banquet because I could not. But men are doing things. But the reality is education, partnership in that regard, not total agreement on what we're doing. But we didn't get here today by people being observers. They have to be participants. And women need to continue to do that. While our entree into college now and our graduation rates are higher, it is the ability to embrace more women on corporate boards, and not just women of color.
Absolutely.
Coming together that we advocate. For every time a woman achieves something, it makes it so much easier for me. And we're getting there. I just have to tell you, the other parent, the nurse, He was a father. And he had gone through very similar things that I had. It's the balancing, the picking and choosing. And I'm not willing to say my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents worked this hard to get us here today, that we would accept that we would have a lowered standard of living, that America is history. The women's movement hasn't stopped. It is now not just equality for women, it's equality for everybody. And I think that's a huge step going forward.
Thank you, Linda Alvarado, Jeannie Ritter, and filmmaker Dyllan McGee.